I mean, this is the OJ case of the 19th century, but in DC and with political people. This was the most covered event in human history to this point, and it's a story that Americans are experiencing almost as one for the first time in American history. And so I think this really creates this impression on people that, you know what Sickles did was right. The jury was right to acquit him. We should stop punishing people for this. And then it's off to the races as far as the unwritten law goes.
You've reached American History Hotline. You ask the questions, we get the answers. Leave a message.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
What's up, fam? It's sports journalist Ari Chambers.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your girl, Sam J.
And we're the hosts of Everyone Watches Women's Sports, a new podcast from Together.
We're breaking down the biggest headlines, the viral moments, and the stories everyone's talking about across women's sports.
From game-changing performances to culture-shifting conversations, we'll give you our takes, our debates, and a few laughs along the way.
Because everyone watches women's sports. Listen to Everyone Watches Women's Sports
on the iHeartRadio app,
Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Joy is essential, and it's also elusive. But now, there's a new and exciting way to start your journey toward a more joyful existence. Joy 101. It's a new podcast hosted by me, Hoda Kotb. If you're craving inspiration to maximize your joy, tune into these candid, uplifting, and moving on-air chats. Open your free iHeartRadio app, search Joy 101, and listen now. Joy 101 with Hoda Kotb is presented by CVS.
My first guest is Paris Hilton, Shakira, Luke, and Yerin. Have surprises?
Many surprises.
Welcome to the Sweet 305 podcast, where the group chat comes to life.
What up? You're the only person I know that loves a yellow Starburst.
It's lemonade.
This is Sweet 305. Here, oversharing is encouraged. Listen to Sweet 305 with Lele Pons on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey everyone, it's the Jonas Brothers. This week on the podcast, Hey Jonas, we're hanging out with Michael Bublé. After Kevin's recent interesting confession about Michael, we figured there's only one thing to do. We must invite Michael Bublé on the podcast, and we want to know what's on his Sexy Time playlist.
You know, I did an interview, and they're like, have you heard about this Jonas Brothers thing? And they were like, what did you think of it? And I was like, well, I mean, it's reciprocal.
We talk about Kevin's confession, Michael's reaction, and a whole lot more. Our conversation with Michael Bublé is out now. Listen to Hey Jonas on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
30 years ago, an island off Manhattan almost brought down New York City.
Who will you trust? Your friends and neighbors? Or will you trust the people 5 miles overseas?
This is a story about neighbors turning on each other and what happens when a forgotten place decides it's had enough.
But we're not stopping, are we?
Listen to Revisionist History, The Staten Island Problem on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey there, American History Hotliners. Bob Crawford here, thrilled to be joining you again for another episode of American History Hotline, the show where you ask the questions. I'm just your humble, obedient servant trying to get you some answers. The best way to get us a question is to record a video or a voice memo on your phone and email it to americanhistoryhotline@gmail.com. That's americanhistoryhotline@gmail.com. Look, many of you have direct messaged me on Instagram with questions. That's great. I always reply to you, though. Go back, record yourself asking that question, and post it to americanhistoryhotline@gmail.com. Okay, today's question is a spicy one. Here to help me answer it is author of the book Star-Spangled Scandal, Sex, Murder, and the Trial That Changed America. He's also an old dad like me.
I am Chris Rose, and I am an old dad like Bob.
Okay, Chris, here's the question we got from a listener. It's from Jason in Chicago. I heard it used to be legal to kill a man for sleeping with your wife, and it wasn't that long ago either. Is that true?
That is substantially true. So in starting about the mid-19th century and going until the 1950s, it was, to varying degrees, almost impossible to hold someone legally accountable for the murder of someone who had dishonored their household, in the words of the time.
So we need to let our listeners know why you are the expert to answer this question, because you wrote a book called Star-Spangled Scandal, and it's about a murder from 1859 committed by a Congressman, Dan Sickles. Tell us a little bit about the Sickles story, and then we'll get into how this plays with something called the Unwritten Law.
Sure. So Daniel Sickles is on top of the world. He's been elected to Congress from New York City. His beautiful wife is quickly rising in the ranks in Washington society. She puts on the most sought after parties, and prominent members of both political parties will be in attendance. The ambassadors from other countries, business leaders, and people think, wow, sky's the limit for Daniel Sickles. He was a protege of then President James Buchanan. He had served as Buchanan's aide when Buchanan was minister to the court of St. James. So what we would know today as the ambassador to the United Kingdom. And so as far as Daniel Sickles knows, he's on top of the world, and the sky's the limit. And someday he's going to be living across the street from his Lafayette Square mansion in the White House. Then one day after a party, he pulls out a letter that had been handed to him earlier that day by a messenger, and he reads it. And the letter tells him, it's a pseudonymous letter. It's signed RPG, and it tells him in great specificity that his wife, Teresa Sickles, is meeting Philip Barton Key, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, so the chief federal prosecutor for our nation's capital, and American royalty, the son of Francis Scott Key, the author of our national anthem. And the letter explains that Barton Key, as he is known, is meeting Teresa Sickles in a house on 15th Street, and that, as the letter writer says, he has as much the use of your wife as you do. And so Sickles would ordinarily have ignored something like that, except for the details, which made it both hard to ignore and easy to substantiate. And so Sickles goes into the map room of the House of Representatives, and he finds what I'll describe as his henchman, a guy that he had brought with from Tammany Hall in New York, got him a job in D.C., and kind of his eyes and ears in the Capitol. He tells him what happened, shows him the letter, and they are able to verify the truth of the letter. And Sickles confronts his wife, who admits her guilt, who signs a confession. And then Sickles is beside himself. What do I do? What do I do about my marriage? What do I do about my wife and my daughter and my political career? And what do I do about Key? And so while Sickles is sort of talking this through with his henchman and a guy named Butterworth, who was a friend of his from New York who was visiting D.C., they're sitting in the parlor of the Sickles house on Lafayette Square, and they watch Barton Key enter Lafayette Square and start waving his handkerchief at the house, which was the signal for Sickles' wife to go meet him at their rendezvous house. And so while Sickles is trying to figure out what to do and bursting with anger and rage and frustration, he sees this guy out there in Lafayette Square on a Sunday, unseasonably warm Sunday in 1859. He heads out there in a trench coat with at least 3 firearms, and he sends Mr. Key to his fate.
So he murders him in broad daylight.
In broad daylight. There are plenty of witnesses, everyone from Treasury clerks to Cyrus McCormick, the inventor of the mechanical reaper, is an eyewitness who testifies at the trial. And interestingly enough, there is a young man who was an aide to James Buchanan. He runs into the White House to tell James Buchanan what had happened. And the president, actually, this is one instance we know of for sure in American history where a president committed the crime of obstruction of justice. So this young aide says Daniel Sickles has murdered Barton Key in front of the White House. And of course, as we mentioned, Sickles is Buchanan's close friend. He's his former aide. He's a kind of a protege. He tells his aide, he goes, well, as a material witness, you might be held in jail until the trial, which of course was not true. And he says, here, I'm going to give you some money. I'm going to give you a souvenir of your time here in the White House. And he hands him a shaving razor that he had bought while he was ambassador in the United Kingdom. And he says, here's the shaving razor, which I just assume is not a great souvenir. It was either a better gift at the time than it seems today, or it was just what he had around him. Hands him that and some money and says, you better get back to North Carolina. And so that story made it into the North Carolina newspapers later in that young man's life. And I actually was able to get in touch with his grandson and track down the razor. So the family donated that razor to Wheatland, to the James Buchanan homestead and museum. And so I actually helped find that razor, find the family, and got that where people can go view it as a tangible proof of how the president helped a witness get out of town.
That's amazing, Chris. So here, I'm sure Sickles is arrested, right?
Sickles actually goes and turns himself in. And of course, Sickles is a guy who always does things with style. Where do you turn yourself in after you've murdered the U.S. attorney? You go to the home of the attorney general in Franklin Square. And so he went and turned himself in at the home of the U.S. attorney general. And he was held in a notorious prison called the Blue Jug in Washington, D.C. And when he complained about his accommodations, the jailer said, these are the finest accommodations you members of Congress have afforded us.
And so what happens at the trial? How does that go? How does the trial go? Because this plays into our, the undergirding of what is the unwritten law.
Absolutely. So one interesting aspect of this trial, among many, is that Sickles is represented by the first legal dream team in American history. And it kind of happens by accident. News of his arrest gets out. His friends in New York start sending lawyers. People in DC start finding lawyers for him. So he has this extensive legal team drawn of friends of his who were the most prominent lawyers in New York City. Edwin Stanton, who is on the verge of eternal fame, about to join Buchanan's cabinet as Attorney General. And of course, in short order, Abraham Lincoln's cabinet as our Civil War Secretary of War. But before that, he's Daniel Sickles' lawyer. He's a prominent member of Sickles' defense team. And so you have these incredible lawyers lined up to represent Sickles. You have a new U.S. attorney who had to be appointed by James Buchanan before the trial could commence. At first, there's a lot of popular feeling in the country that maybe Sickles did what was necessary or what was right. As time passed, everyone seemed to agree that the further they could prolong the trial, the likelier it was that Sickles would hang. And so the defense makes a series of arguments. Kind of a half-hearted self-defense argument. Well, none of you people saw whether Key had a gun in his hand. Maybe Key had a gun. Maybe Key threatened him. You don't really know. Maybe this sort of I'm not sure that they believed it, but they were trying to just kick up dust every way they could. They argued that the affair itself was provocation for the murder, and that the murder was justified on those grounds alone, which was kind of a remarkable argument to make in a court of law. As the U.S. attorney pointed out, because the most you'd really seen before that was if you caught a man in bed with your wife, there might be mitigating circumstances. You might get away with manslaughter, some kind of heat of the moment defense. But it was never seen as a complete defense that would lead to an acquittal.
So how did temporary insanity play into this?
Well, so you have witnesses who encountered Sickles before the shooting. And you have witnesses, including the Attorney General of the United States and a U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania who saw him right after the killing. And he appeared pretty composed. And so you couldn't make the argument that Sickles was just insane. But the argument they made was that it was suffering under temporary insanity. So, he puts on a trench coat to conceal 3 firearms and walks across Lafayette Square. And I've paced it out. It's a few minute walk. It's, Lafayette Square in front of the White House is pretty big.
It's plenty of time to realize that you're about to make a big mistake.
Well, I don't know if he ever saw it as a mistake, but he certainly was cognizant of what he was doing. But his defense argued to the jury that during the time that he shot Key, and maybe not a minute before, maybe not a minute after this all transpired, but certainly during that time, he was laboring under a mental distress that excused his conduct as a matter of law.
So this becomes something that is known as the unwritten law. And, I was reading your book. There's a whole chapter on this in your book, which I recommend everybody go buy immediately. It's Star-Spangled Scandal by our great guest today, Chris DeRose. But it wasn't always like this, right? It wasn't always like you commit a crime of passion and you're going to be, found temporarily insane and you get off. What were the societal changes in the mid 19th century that made this okay, that made juries say, I don't think we should hold this man responsible for his actions?
Yes. So I think one of them actually is the rise of mass media. So if we think about this celebrity obsessed, scandal obsessed, breaking news obsessed culture that we live in today, it all has its roots in this event from 1859. So in the beginning of American history, you really had two kinds of newspapers. You had political newspapers that parties would subsidize and try to get out to as many people as possible to promote their ideas and their candidates. And then you had sort of what you think of as like the shipping news, commercial business intelligence, big broadsheets with lots of information about which ship docked here and how much did they sell their cotton for and what cargo did they buy in port and things like that people had to pay a premium to buy. As printing presses got more efficient, you could now print newspapers that you could sell at a profit to the average person. And so news coverage changed and became more sensational to sort of fulfill this demand of the average person for news about crime and fires and animal stories and the kind of things you see written about, talked about today in the news. So more popular subjects. And so, sort of called the penny press, where the average person now had access to daily newspapers, perhaps less edifying information than may have preceded it. But so you have these newspapers, and then the invention of the telegraph and the scaling of the telegraph. So now, I write about in the book about how it took 2 weeks to find out in the state capital of Missouri that William Henry Harrison had died. And when the telegraph is introduced, people wondered what was the use in finding out information right away when you could wait a few days and find out about it through the mail, because newspapers were being exchanged throughout the country. It was free to post newspapers, and so newspapers would exchange copies of their editions with each other and then print each other's news all across the country. But that would take some time. So with the scaling of the telegraph, you had almost instantaneous information all across the country. And so Sickles really lit the match with this incredible story, right? The prominent congressman, the beautiful wife, the handsome son of American royalty, and this horrific crime that happened in front of the White House. I mean, this is the OJ case of the 19th century, but in DC and with political people. But so people were looking for turn of the screw coverage from this trial, everything they could find out about the people involved. And really, if you looked prior to that, you think about like the murder of Helen Jewett, for instance, in New York. That was probably the most covered crime prior to that. Think about a few paragraphs in a newspaper. And in this case, many newspapers are printing verbatim coverage of that day's proceedings and trial. So this is the most covered event in human history to this point. And it's a story that Americans are experiencing almost as one for the first time in American history. And so I think this really creates this impression on people that, what Sickles did was right. The jury was right to acquit him. We should stop punishing people for this. And then it's off to the races as far as the unwritten law goes.
And it gets to the point where you have governors giving pardons for these crimes in the cases when men are convicted. Talk about a few of those, because there's one interesting one I recall from South Carolina.
Yes. Well, if it even got that far, there's been some research into just how many thousands of cases where the unwritten law spared someone what would otherwise be the legal ramifications of murder. And many cases were just never charged. If the cases were charged, often you would find the grand jury would refuse to indict. If the grand jury indicted, the judge may well dismiss the case. And if the judge didn't dismiss the case, the jury would likely acquit. And in the rare instances where you could get somebody to verdict on an unwritten law case and the jury found them guilty, the judge would often hand down a nominal fine or a minor slap on the wrist. However, in the unusual cases during the era of the unwritten law, where you could get someone all the way to verdict and the judge handed down a meaningful sentence, the governor would be expected to use their executive clemency to let the person go. And there was one instance in Kentucky that was remarkable. A man catches his wife in bed with another man. He shoots the man, kills him. And the governor announces preemptively that if there are any criminal proceedings, I'm going to pardon him. So don't even bother. And what was really unusual about that is that the victim was the governor's son. But even a governor would be expected to pardon the killer of his own son in order to vindicate the public expectation and public support for the unwritten law. Now, in South Carolina, I think this is the most incredible. We, as historians, Bob, we tell stories to illustrate phenomenon. And I think this is the best example. So in South Carolina, the bosom of the Confederacy, after Reconstruction, a black man catches a white man in bed with his wife and kills him. And the governor pardons him. So the unwritten law was stronger and more widely supported than racism and unequal treatment of the law in post-Reconstruction South Carolina, shortly after the Civil War.
Hey everyone, it's the Jonas Brothers. This week on the podcast, Hey Jonas, we're hanging out with the one, the only, and the one, Michael Bublé.
You guys, I'm genuinely a huge fan. Like, it's funny, I made a whole thing about doing this TikTok where I got you guys to sign the guitar, but right. It was real. Like, we listen to in the car all the time. Like, it literally is hanging up with all your signatures.
Wow. I am so honored. After Kevin's recent, let's call it interesting confession about Michael, I had a feeling this wasn't going to be going away. We figured there was only one thing to do. We must invite Michael Bublé on the podcast, and we want to know what's on his Sexy Time playlist.
I did an interview, and they're like, have you heard about this Jonas Brothers thing? And they're like, what did you think of it? And I was like, well, I mean, it's reciprocal. Like, what a man got to do? What a man got to do?
We talk about Kevin's confession, Michael's reaction, and a whole lot more. Do you have a hockey rink in your house?
I do.
Our conversation with Michael Bublé is out now. Listen to Hey Jonas on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
What's up, fam? I'm sports journalist Ari Chambers.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your girl, Sam J.
And we're the hosts of Everyone Watches Women's Sports, a new podcast from Together and iHeart Women's Sports.
Because let's be real, women's sports is giving us way too much to talk about these days.
The highlights, the rivalries, the breakout stars, the moments that take over your entire timeline.
And the conversations that start during the game and somehow keep going all week.
Every week, we're breaking down the biggest stories across women's sports.
We'll give you our takes, our debates, and probably a few disagreements.
We'll talk to athletes, celebrate big moments, and get into what's happening on and off the field, court, track, and beyond.
Because we're not just interested in what happened, we're interested in why everyone's talking about it. Because everyone watches women's sports. So if you're already a fan,
or you're just getting into the game, there's a seat for you right here.
Listen to Everyone Watches Women's Sports
on the iHeartRadio app,
Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, I'm Hoda Kotb, host of the podcast Joy 101 with Hoda Kotb. Okay, if you know me, you know this. I'm always searching for inspiration, for support, and useful tools to help maximize joy. So this podcast lets us uncover all of that together. We're going to have these meaningful conversations with the world's most fascinating people, like when actress Olivia Munn shared how she overcame fierce health challenges that she never saw coming.
I've gone through breast cancer and then helped my mother through breast cancer, and that was more difficult. There's a lot of people who understand postpartum depression. I was not prepared for postpartum anxiety.
Olympic champ Shawn Johnson revealed why she had no choice but to be a gymnast.
There was something about gymnastics that was intoxicating to me. It's given me a belief that we all have one of those treasures inside of us. We just have to find it.
Listen to Joy 101 with Hoda Kotb on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
My first guest is Paris Hilton, Shakira, Luke and Yerin, Samira y Gracie. I'm so excited.
On the bouncy bed.
You have surprises?
Many surprises.
Welcome to Suite 305, where the group chat comes to life. What up? Es como que una forma de decir como, hola amiga, hola mejor amiga, hola hermana, what up?
Mira, nunca lo había hablado con nadie. Excepto con mis hijos. Mis hijos sí saben.
Sé mi amante.
Uf. Uf. Qué increíble. Ya, la telenovela.
You're the only person I know that loves a yellow starburst. It's lemonade.
No hay alguien que te falta, como que tú dices, me gustaría colaborar con esta persona. This is Suite 305. Listen to Suite 305 with Lele Pons as part of My Cultura podcast network on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Jake Brennan, and on my podcast, Disgraceland, I tell the stories behind music's biggest names, the moments that shaped them, haunted them, and changed music history forever. Like how the story of the Foo Fighters and Dave Grohl isn't just about music. Imagine that. You're in the biggest band on the planet, as Dave Grohl was in 1994 in Nirvana. And the phone rings, and you learn that your singer, your friend, the reluctant voice of a generation, Kurt Cobain, is dead. This is a story of fame, pressure, friendship, and the weight of fulfilling your destiny. Learn more about the moment everything changed. Disgraceland is part of the Exactly Right Network. Listen to new episodes every Tuesday, bonus episodes Thursday, and rewinds on Sunday on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is American History Hotline. I'm your host, Bob Crawford. Today, my guest is Chris DeRose, author of Star-Spangled Scandal, Sex, Murder, and the Trial That Changed America. We're talking about, well, sex and murder. Remember to send us your burning, hot, sexy questions about American history. Record yourself using the voice memo app on your phone and email it to AmericanHistoryHotline@gmail.com. That's AmericanHistoryHotline@gmail.com. Now, back to the show. So, Chris, the unwritten law, and this is the part that I kind of find most fascinating about this, is that it's never codified.
Never codified. In fact, the American Bar Association speculated that maybe it should be codified because it was undermining actual laws, laws that had been passed by legislatures and common law that had been handed down by judges. Because probably the most closely adhered to law in the country at this point in American history was a law that nobody ever wrote down.
So, Chris, you spent a lot of time studying this case and all the consequences of it, from temporary insanity to the unwritten law. What does this tell you about human nature? Like, what thoughts did this kind of bring to mind, or ponderings for yourself personally? Because you're a lawyer as well, right? You were trained in the law.
So, yeah, and as a former attorney, as both a prosecutor and former criminal defense lawyer, you understand that, like, the civilization is a thin veneer. And that when people experience something traumatic like this, there is a natural human impulse for revenge. And there is an understanding among people why you did what you did, and an understanding that you're probably not a menace to society. You're just a threat to people who would violate your home, in words that were used at the time. And so I think that's what we learn about human nature, right? That everything we see that appears to be a bulwark against anarchy and against people just reacting and acting on their natural impulses. I don't know. I said civilization's a thin veneer.
So this is a cultural moment, right? The period, which was about 100 years, if not a little more.
It goes into the 1950s. So plenty of your listeners.
So how does it change? How does it change back? How does it get to the point where someone says, no, this guy should be penalized for this?
Right. So I think it all revolves around our perception of women and women's rights. If you look at the news coverage around the Sickles trial, Teresa Sickles and her virtue was almost seen as Daniel Sickles' property in a way, right? He is the man of the family. She is his wife. Barton Key had taken something from him. And it's really interesting to see how Teresa Sickles really got it coming and going, because she both gets blamed for the affair and ostracized from society, but also Key is treated as someone who seduced her, and this poor innocent woman who had no agency in this situation. So she was treated at once as having no agency, but also as being to blame and paid for with the price of her place in society. Her friends never called on her again, and she never went out in society following this incident for the rest of her life. So I think, as with World War II, more women were entering the workforce. With so many men under arms, women entering the workforce and new roles and new responsibilities, having their own money, having a measure of independence they didn't enjoy, attaining new status in society. And so I think as we enter the 1950s, we're really starting to say, you know what, a woman's honor or a daughter's honor, it's really not a man's to vindicate anymore. Women can make their own decisions and be responsible for those decisions, and it's really not. So I think it's that changing perception of women and their role in society that leads to both the beginning and end of the unwritten law.
Wow, Chris, that is crazy. Like, we think that we live in crazy times now, and we do live in crazy times. But I think through your book and through talking about the unwritten law, all times are crazy. Do you think?
As a historian, I don't share the panic that some people do at various points in history. We are very lucky to have been born and to live in America, and at this time in history in America. And things were always crazy, and every generation has had significant problems, and some far greater than ours.
In the chaos, there is optimism. Chris DeRose, thank you so much.
A pleasure.
You've been listening to American History Hotline, a production of iHeart Podcasts and Scratch Track Productions. The show's executive producer is James Morrison. Our executive producers from iHeart are Jordan Runtall and Jason English. Original music composed by me, Bob Crawford. Please keep in touch. Our email is americanhistoryhotline@gmail.com. If you like the show, please tell your friends and leave us a review in Apple Podcasts. I'm your host, Bob Crawford. Feel free to hit me up on social media to ask a history question or to let me know what you think of the show. You can find me at Bob Crawford Base. Thanks so much for listening. See you next week.
What's up, fam? It's sports journalist Ari Chambers.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your girl, Sam J.
And we're the hosts of Everyone Watches Women's Sports, a new podcast from Together.
We're breaking down the biggest headlines, the viral moments, and the stories everyone's talking about across women's sports.
From game-changing performances to culture-shifting conversations, we'll give you our takes, our debates, and a few laughs along the way.
Because everyone watches women's sports. Listen to Everyone Watches Women's Sports
on the iHeartRadio app,
Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Joy is essential, and it's also elusive. But now, there's a new and exciting way to start your journey toward a more joyful existence. Joy 101. It's a new podcast hosted by me, Hoda Kotb. If you're craving inspiration to maximize your joy, tune into these candid, uplifting, and moving on-air chats. Open your free iHeartRadio app, search Joy 101, and listen now. Joy 101 with Hoda Kotb is presented by CVS.
My first guest is Paris Hilton, Shakira, Luke, and Yerin. Have surprises?
Many surprises.
Welcome to the Suite 305 podcast, where the group chat comes to life.
What up? You're the only person I know that loves a yellow Starburst. It's lemonade.
This is Suite 305. Here, oversharing is encouraged. Listen to Suite 305 with Lele Pons on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey everyone, it's the Jonas Brothers. This week on the podcast, Hey Jonas, we're hanging out with Michael Bublé. After Kevin's recent interesting confession about Michael, we figured there's only one thing to do. We must invite Michael Bublé on the podcast, and we want to know what's on his Sexy Time playlist.
I did an interview, and they're like, have you heard about this Jonas Brothers thing? And they were like, what did you think of it? And I was like, well, I mean, it's reciprocal.
We talk about Kevin's confession, Michael's reaction, and a whole lot more. Our conversation with Michael Bublé is out now. Listen to Hey Jonas on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
30 years ago, an island off Manhattan almost brought down New York City.
Who will you trust? Your friends and neighbors? Or will you trust the people 5 miles overseas?
This is a story about neighbors turning on each other and what happens when a forgotten place decides it's had enough.
But we're not stopping, are we?
Listen to Revisionist History, The Staten Island Problem on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.